the guy who did that ad?
People start pollution. People can stop it.
Also did the first term limit ads that we ran in 1992. His claim to fame was that spot. That was just one of the most famous spots in television history. And he was a really, really interesting guy. And he helped us. He did some different analysis. It wasn't really polling. It was like mall intercept things where they'd ask people different questions and have them pick from different options and different slogans. And the slogan, I think one of the finalists in the slogans was keep term limits, keep them honest. And there were a couple others. And I think most of us liked the term limits, keep them honest. He liked, and he ended up convincing us that the best one was term limits. It's something you can do. And to this day, all of us believe he was so farsighted in that was the emotion people want. They wanted to do something. They're concerned about their country. They're not sure what to do, but here's something that would help break up the problem. Much in the same way, I'm going on a tangent here, but much in the same way that our advertising in Tom Foley's race in 1994 when George Nethercutt defeated him, only speaker defeated all the way. The last speaker who was defeated was all the way before the Civil War, and he had been speaker, I think, for only one term. So that, to take out the Speaker of the House was huge. But the key was that the people in that district, they didn't want to hurt Foley. And they did kind of believe that it was better for them to have the Speaker of the House in their district. In the end, they believed that voting him out was making a sacrifice for the good of the country. And that in our advertising, his negatives were at like 50% or 51%. And when we went on the air, that's where his negatives were. And he ended up losing like 49. He got 49 and Nethercutt got 51. It was extremely close. But that was, and if you look back, I did months and months ago, I looked back at some of the articles. I had a little subscription to this thing that allows you to go back to newspapers. And I figured I should get my money's worth. So I went and looked up some of these things. And it was just interesting the things and people in that district would say. But that was the emotion, that it was, they were doing something against their own kind of naked self-interest, their financial self-interest, their pork barrel self-interest for the good of the country. And anyway, I don't know why I went on that tangent, but it's a fascinating race that I think doesn't get as much attention as it should historically. Really important for a Speaker of the House to be defeated, what a wave that election was. And I think that was, I have a ton of respect for the people of that district.
What year was that?
1994.
That was
the Republican Revolution. And of course, Dick Armey, days later, saying, well, maybe the people don't want term limits so much now. He did. In fact, Horace Cooper, who was his chief of staff and is a buddy of mine now, and we knew each other then. We weren't friendly, but we had at least met each other. I'll never forget, Horace Cooper calls me on the phone and says, turn off your blankety blank phone bank. I said, Horace, what are you talking about? He says, don't play me. Turn off your phone bank. And I finally realized Armey has made this statement, and his phones, his staff can't use the phone because it's ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. I told him, I said, look, he was saying, I know how Washington works. I said, you may know how Washington works. We don't have one penny being spent to ring your phone. That's the American people, pal. And it was. But see, in Washington, there's a huge level of cynicism. There's a huge level of disdain. And I don't say this that Horace was somehow, the people don't know anything. It has to be manufactured. But in Washington, it almost always is manufactured. This, though, was different. It was really different. And I thank my lucky stars to be involved in an issue like term limits, because it's easy to get jaded and to be cynical about what can happen in this country, and to just like, oh, the public's never gonna, people aren't going to live and breathe politics all the time. They're not going to get, as a libertarian, they're not going to, what I want today is a political philosophy. I'm dropping everything else in my life and I'm really focused on political philosophy. That's not going to happen. But term limits touched a nerve, because a lot of people who had great lives, loved their wife or loved their husband, loved their kids, had a good job, had a nice house, were worried about where the country was. And term limits was something they could do. And the funny thing about it is, the country is in worse shape now on all those kind of metrics. And people still, by 82% in the latest poll, want term limits. Liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans, it's actually the unity issue across the country. And if you had term limits on the ballot all over this country, you would have polls staying open all over the country to handle the hordes of people who would be coming out to vote for term limits. And don't get me wrong, I think it's a really critical issue and a hugely important reform, but it's not going to solve all the problems. But it is something that the American people love and they're not at all afraid of. I remember when I first got to Washington, there was a panel discussion. I stayed late at work to be part of this discussion. I was one of the two people for term limits. There were two people against it. One was William Proxmire, who was, had the Golden Fleece Award and was just respected by all sides. And anyway, I remember when it was his turn to speak, he started talking about if we had term limits, we wouldn't have people like Sam Nunn, and he just named off a bunch of people who were in the Congress. And I'm looking at the crowd, and you can just see on their faces, they're thinking, who? Why? I mean, it was just like, really? We need these guys I don't know anything about? And I think most Americans, the idea that somehow, the country can't go on without Sam Nunn, he left the Congress. It didn't seem that we didn't fall off a cliff. It was just, it really was kind of enlightening. The other interesting thing is that during the debate, William Proxmire referred to me as a hired gun, which was kind of flattering because I was a kid and barely hired. I mean, I hardly could shake two nickels together. Some things never change. But it was the kind of thing where he, attacked me in a personal way as a hired gun, like I didn't believe it. And boy, believing in what I was doing and what I am doing has never been my problem in life. In fact, maybe it's been a problem that I believed too much in what I was doing, so I haven't always been as wise as maybe I should be. After the debate, Dr. Thurber, who's I think still at American University, came up to me and apologized and said something to the effect of, I don't know why he would say that, especially since he's getting an honorarium. They had paid Proxmire $2,000, as I recall, to be there that night. I'm missing my family for a night. And of course, I'm so politically obsessed, I wasn't crying about missing my family, although I did miss them. They're great folks. But Proxmire is getting paid $2,000 to be there and calls me the hired gun. And it just, and because I had kind of respected him, he wasn't someone I thought, I agree with all his policies, but I always kind of respected him as a honest, hardworking, good guy. And boy, talk about, it's why I say I was cynical when I came to Washington, and I soon realized I could never be cynical enough.